Hey everyone, welcome back. Back in the early days of the 80s and somewhat, I think, mid 90s, we used to have in the UK. Well, I mean, we still have them. Places known as newsagents, and newsagents were also known as corner shops, or if you're a kid, sweet shops, because you'd find a lot of sweets there. And what these newsagents or these corner shops, not every single newsagent was a shop in the corner of a street. You had other newsagents which were in the middle of a street, but they were basically sort of like neighborhood, sort of, one-stop shop. Toothpaste, shampoo, bread, milk, just the normal everyday necessities you could pick up. And the other thing that you could pick up was, of course, the news. So newspapers, magazines, and most importantly, comic books. There used to be an entire sort of like shelving section at some, maybe as you just entered in, you'd find it on the right or left-hand side. And the top shelf would be something that's not fit for young kids. And then you'd have, gardening magazines, all sorts of magazines. But right at the very bottom, for the kids or adults, you would have the comic book section. And now these comic books are not the compendium of comic books that you get right now, or older stories put into a glossy format. No, these were proper, real-time comic book editions. So, Legion of Superheroes, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, The Incredible Hulk, all the major running series. You would find the up-to-date editions in these newsagents. And the great thing was that you wouldn't have to travel very far. I mean, if you had a newsagent next to your house, then, every other day or perhaps every weekend, it would be an exciting time. You take your pocket money, go down, buy a couple of comic books when they used to be affordable. I mean, they used to be 40 pence when I first started collecting. They're now a lot more than that. And I'm sure it's the same case in America and across the world. Comic books are very heavily priced now. But, such is the price of progress, I guess, and inflation. Anyhow, you used to be able to collect entire sort of runs just by visiting your local newsagent. It died out somewhat in the mid-90s. Less and less comic books were stacked, and eventually it got to the stage where no current edition comic books can be found in newsagents. Now, the benefits of having a newsagent that stocked comic books was that it introduced the medium of comic books to a lot of young kids who would go there with their parents, or, the parents might pick up something for the kids and whatever. But it was there, it was accessible. It wasn't just the realm of specialist comic book shops. Many kids don't go to specialist comic book shops anyway. I mean, you take something like Forbidden Planet, for example, which is a pretty major comic-related hub in central London. At least it used to be there. I haven't gone there for many years, but there used to be one in central London. If it's not there anymore, then, silly me. Anyhow, Forbidden Planet was a central hub for back issues and current issues. Very, very heavily comic book focused, with a bit of, side sort of revenue in RPG and other games related sort of like merchandise, models, etc., etc. Now, the last time I went a few years back, it was more heavily geared towards toys, models, role-playing games, etc., and less to do with comic books. There were hardly any back issues, a very small section of back issues. And the current stuff was limited, to say the least. You now actually have to go to very niche specialist independent comic book stores to find proper back issues and or current runs. I don't know what's happened. I don't know why they stopped doing newsagents. I mean, the only thing that I can think of, I suppose, it will have to be financial. Perhaps it was to cut distribution costs. I don't know why, because as far as I'm aware, there was a massive heyday in the 80s and in the 90s, with comic books being quite popular. Admittedly, I think in the 2000 and onwards, the attraction for regular paper comic books perhaps is not the same as it was before, but yeah, I mean in the 80s, as far as I can recall, was pretty much a heyday for comic books. It was a big thing, and then it stopped. Now the irony is that superheroes, I think, are more recognized worldwide in the absence of the availability of comic books. And comic books, even though the superheroes like the Avengers and Justice League and Superman are so widely splashed all over the big screen, I think their sales are clearly sort of going down because people's superhero fix is now being satisfied through other mediums. It's bizarre. The very thing that gave birth to these superhero characters is slowly being phased out. I'm saddened by this. As far as I'm concerned, the sheer pleasure, the experience of holding a comic book in your hand, flipping through the pages, admiring the artwork, smelling the pages. I mean, if you're like me and you love the smell of paper, or especially old paper, it's a great thing to do. I know it sounds weird, but trust me. I mean, if anyone does that, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's not a kink. It really isn't. It's just it's nostalgia. It takes you back. Anyhow, it's come to a close. Now, what's going to happen down the road, as far as I can tell, is that these heroes will be so closely linked to the actors who are playing them that they'll basically become like movie stars, right? People will start referring to, well, people already do. People sort of equate Robert Downey Jr. with Iron Man and Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. I think that's the most sort of extreme example of when that's taken place, right? Basically owning a character to such an extent that you're almost, you can't tell the difference. But yeah, the magic of comic books, which really cannot be replicated, even on the big screen, no matter how great the special effects get, the one thing that you cannot replicate in a comic book is your interpretation of that character. So to give you an example, people really love the way that Hugh Jackman has portrayed Wolverine. I think it's very good. But in my mind, as I was growing up, Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine was not my Wolverine. My Wolverine was rougher, tougher, less, I would say a lot more emotionally in control, and just a vicious little guy who was popping his claws and cursing a lot. I think that, physicality aside, obviously Hugh Jackman is nothing like the description I just gave. But even from a personality perspective, I would say that Hugh Jackman's Wolverine does not tick off the boxes that I had in my mind, in my imagination as I was growing up. That's not the fault of Hugh Jackman. That's just trying to say that whatever you read in the pages of a comic book, your own mind kind of reinterprets. It's, for example, when you're reading a comic book and you have a panel where someone throws a punch, then you have another panel where somebody else throws a punch. That gap between the two panels of the action taking place, your mind just fills in the gaps. When you have dialogue in a comic, your mind basically makes up a voice for those characters. And it's always different to what's portrayed on the big screen. Again, no one's fault. That's just the way it is. This is why comic books in their paper form, where you can read about the characters, when you can see the characters, is so important. And again, because the comic book medium is based on a paper format, classically, for those of us, I think from the more classic generation, 80s, 90s, and onwards, I think for myself, personally speaking, because I'm so used to the idea of holding a comic book and reading a comic book, hard copy. I would need to have that hard copy to truly enjoy the experience. And I fear. And I've mentioned this before, I do fear that this is all being phased out. It's not so much about the comic book, it's not so much about good stories, which people have to read. I think it's more about now audio-visual entertainment. And I think that we'll be worse off for it. I think the comic book fan, in the classical sense, will die out. And again, I think that there is a direct correlation between getting rid of these newsagents' stock of comic books, and this sort of, this falling out of this love affair with collecting comic books. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. I struggle to find the justification for not stocking comic books in these newsagents. I really do. You must be gaining more than you're losing, because when these comic books were there, they were being bought. That's why you kept. If it was falling sales, that sort of like led to. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Were the falling sales as a result of less comics being stocked, Or were the less comics being stocked because of falling sales? Was it like a self-fulfilling prophecy? I don't know. It's bloody confusing. I hope that they somehow reverse this trend. I hope that they bring back comic books in newsagents, proper magazine. Sometimes the old stuff is good, Sometimes old is gold. Just because we have this, technological wave going on at the moment where everything is being transferred onto the World Wide Web or on a cloud or, on your phone or whatever, doesn't make it good, in my opinion. And that probably sounds. I probably sound like a bitter old man. Back in my day when I was a young lad, yeah, maybe, possibly, but yeah, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. I hope they bring it back. I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I think that if it's gone, it's gone, and they're not going to bother because for those people who are interested only in the monetary aspect, the superheroes are doing their job. They're bringing in the cash via the big screen. And for those of us who are the old guard, who basically grew up on these superheroes in the pages of comic books, and who have a very different interpretation of these heroes in our own mind, that we hold near and dear, I think that we are the last of a dying breed. I think after us there will be no more classic comic book collectors. There may be some who I guess as like from a cult perspective, like the cult of the comic book. You have these specialist books that people go to, like make a pilgrimage to almost in order to sort of get a kick. You might have that, but yeah, last of a dying breed. There you go. It started with the newsagents, and now it's going to end with us. But anyway, on a more positive note, I'm trying to think of one, but I can't at the moment. That's my rambling over for the day. Thank you so much for joining in, guys. And yeah, I will catch you in the next one.